Well, lucky you. Charlie Greer podcast. I know it's dark in here. Another rainy day, dark rainy day. Charlie Greer podcast. Like, share, subscribe, comment if you want to support this shit show. In the description, there's the Zelle info. And let's just do this. Guitar gear. I love guitar gear. I love fiddling around, finding your tone. Um, and quite honestly, you can just go with whatever you got. I mean, sometimes that's just crank it up. But my first real rig, which I wouldn't consider, but when I was 17, I went to the guitar store and I took this guy's advice, which I'm glad I did because he was right. He was like, "Look, man, you want to stick out. You don't want to be because this is like 1988 with all that super strats and shredding and uh, and I was more of like a rhythm singer kind of guy. But he talked me in. He was like, "Look, I've got this 335 copy, like a hollow body, a Pinco, made for J.C. Penney and Company." Um, so like I got this 335 and this PV micro stack, which had like a head and then two 10-inch cabs. And I was like, I don't know, hollow body. I mean, nobody's playing hollow body. I mean, maybe one or two people, but at that, this is like big hair and glam, mostly. So I was like, so I plugged it in, and I was like, yeah, you're right. Like this is, and it set me aside. And I'm also a tall dude, so it like some of those guitars look just silly on me. I'm so big. I need something, with some mass. And he's right, made me stick out. Like you have friends over and jamming, and here I am with this hollow body and this PV micro stack that was amazing. It had stereo chorus and it was loud. I think it was only like 20 watts, maybe 40 watts. Solid state. Again, a separate head with two cabs. And I blew those cabs. I mean, I just goodbye, they're gone. But the head would really open up if you put it in front of a 412 cab. And I eventually got another one. I got another stack, the same PV micro stack. So I had two. And I loved it. I mean, until I might still have it in storage in St. Louis. I might have one of those. But it was kind of, again, you kind of go with what you, because at the time, PV wasn't necessarily, everybody wanted a Marshall. And quite honestly, Marshalls weren't as much. I needed more gain. I mean, yeah, you can get pedals, and they're loud and heavy. And the Marshalls, like smaller like solid state, they sounded like shit. So I used that PV up until I got into Love Engineer, and then we were like gear heads. We had some amazing gear. The guitarist was running through like a 1982 or 83 JCM 800 and a 100-watt Marshall JCM 800 and like a 100-watt Sound City. Like non-master volume. You just have to crank this thing up. And it was just like it'd melt your face off. I mean, we were loud. And I don't think he used any pedals. I just think he plugged in and bam, maybe a power conditioner, but volume, like pure. When we rehearsed, it was brutal. And that's the only time I'd wear earplugs is we had a basement rehearsal. It was just like, oh God. And from that, I actually, when Love Engineer split up, I got the JCM 800 head, one of the Les Pauls, part of the PA system, like a cab or two. I've got a a van full of shit, and we were splitting everything up. And then I started selling everything off, and I was, yeah, I had a lot of cool gear. I had like a 63 Melody Maker that had been modified, and I gold leafed it myself. I ended up selling that to the dude in Sunvolt. And then I had a Mesa Boogie V Twin or some pedal, big metal pedal with like 3 channels that added, and I sold that to the guys in Verb Pipe. I was just, I've always like wanted and had good gear. I'd rather wait and spend the money, And you can, and sometimes out of necessity, you just got to do, When I moved to LA on Sunset, right there in Guitar Gulch, where Guitar Center is and everything, it used to be like a Mesa Boogie store, the Carbon store, Guitar Center, of course, and Sam Ash. And I would go into, especially the Carbon store. They were totally cool, and they had like a little jam room. You could grab a guitar off the wall, go in there. And I loved there at the time, they had these Carbon MTS, Master Tube Series, something like that, with a white panel. And it ended up getting and they were pretty cheap for the time. And they're American made tube, not that much bottom end. If you want like some thunderous bottom end, you're not going to get it. Before it's like rock, ratty rock and roll, perfect. I went through those. I shouldn't say his name, but one of these guys I knew in a bigger band, he had like 3 or 4 Marshall stacks, and they looked like he was playing through them. But behind that, he literally had this one Carbon 212, like 100-watt tube combo, because they wouldn't blow. I mean, he was, but he had an endorsement with Marshall, so he had to keep up the appearances. But he was playing a Carbon. So I went through those. I had a few of those. I had the head. I had a combo or two. And then I found a strange kind of amp, like late 80s, early 90s. It was a 60-watt tube Fender Super 210. So it had 2 10-inch speakers, 2 channels. It was red knobbed, kind of looked funny, but just a monster. I mean, this thing was just, I used that, until I blew it. I mean, I blew had to get it fixed, Then I wasn't even using that. And somehow this guy was like, hey, I'll trade you that tube combo for this huge, it was called a Marshall Mode 4. It was like a hybrid amp, like a solid state power amp with tube preamp. I guess it was a metal amp. It was huge, the biggest Marshall cab I've ever seen in this big head. When I first plugged it in, I was like, man, what the fuck? Then I found out how to EQ it, and it was this like, oh my God, it's like the best amp ever. I mean, as far as bottom end, I mean, that thing was, it's like a secret weapon. And then I think I went through a bunch of stuff, but my last gigging cycle, my last album came out in 2008, and I gigged behind that for like 2 years till 2010, just around LA. I was having problems with, again, you're gigging in clubs in LA, and it's here and there and finding parking, and then up and down, your tube amps and people spilling their beers, and you're spilling your beer on your amp. I mean, it's just like, well, dude, it's endless. You gotta, what can I do? And I saw these Marshall valve states, and I remembered them. They were like a hybrid amp, and I remembered them when they came out, and I hated them. Just like, what the, However, necessity, I was in a rehearsal room. Like I tried to find cheap rehearsals, and the guy's like, yeah, it's $10 an hour. So we get there, and all he had was this for guitar, and all I brought was a guitar. I needed a guitar amp. In the room was this valve state, like 212 hybrid. Like, what the fuck? And I complained. I was like, is there anything else you got? And like, no, this is it. And I spent some time, and I realized, I had to turn down the treble, and it's kind of a hot amp, and the gain, and it's turned it up. This thing kind of sounded like an older Marshall. Like I was like, wow, surprised. And I had to literally like cut back on it, like use the more power stage. And for what it is, I mean, I'm 3-chord rock and roll. I'm not like, So I started using those because I could get them for like $100, $150. And of course I blew those too. I mean, there's only so many gigs, and they weren't the best, but I mean, people would be like, what the, again, you have to EQ it differently. And I even forgot a little trick. I had some kind of trick where some tech, like there's a chip in there, like either for the reverb or the chorus or whatever it was. And if you remove that chip, you get like a hotter signal. So that guy modded all those. If I got one, I'd take it to him, and he knew how to. It was, yeah, I think it was some kind of, anyway. But I used those for a long, and people would be like, what, and then after the gig, like, there's no way. But that's what I was using. These valve states, I would use like the mostly the 212. I think they're like 100 watt. Again, hybrid amp. And when I started selling gear, like flipping gear and kind of like almost doing that for like a living, I went through everything. I've had every kind of modded, old Gibson bass amp turned into a fire-breathing dragon, Marshall Killer. Terry Kilgore actually made that amp for me, modded it out. He had KT88s in it, these big, huge. It was great. Too much. And I would go through. I mean, I've had every Orange amps, Fender, Marshall, and I got like sometimes I would get like stuff in trades. And I remember I was doing like an acoustic trade, like I was trading acoustics to get. And this guy was like, well, look, I'll do the trade and I'll even throw in this pedal. I was like, okay, so I got this was about 2 years ago. And this thing is a beast. I mean, it's heavy. It's like cast metal. It's, you got to power this thing. I got the power supply. It's got a tube in it. And what is this called? The Tone Bone Radial Tube Drive Hot British. I mean, it's kind of a one-trick pony. But it's a good trick. I mean, this thing will melt your face off. It's kind of like a hot-rodded Rat pedal. It's got all these switches, the top end, voicing, mid boost, brutal. This thing is brutal. I mean, again, one-trick pony, but it's a pretty good pony. I mean, it's a pretty good trick. And I basically got it for free. And I would put this in front of anything, any kind of clean channel you got, or this will just stomp on the button and you're off to the races. I mean, this thing is crazy. I don't use pedals. So, I mean, when I get them, I would get them in trades and this, that, and the other. But yeah, this thing is, you can find one of these. Go get it. This thing is brutal. So I guess it's a Tone Bone Radial Tube Drive, the Hot British series. I know they made a few of these different kinds, but this one is a monster. So sometimes, again, I would just get gear and you trade and this, that, and the other. And right now, I don't have that much. I have a practice amp. I have a Fender Mustang 2, which is like a 40 watt with a 12-inch speaker. It's just to fart around on. It's got all these effects and 8, amp models. And technically, I could probably do a small gig with it. I mean, I wouldn't want to be seen with, but I mean, as far as like the house, I love it. And at the moment, for the last about year or two, again, I haven't played, but I always like that. For some reason, I get kind of nervous if I don't have like a stack. I just know it's just me growing up in the 80s. Like, I just feel more comfortable with like a stack or two or a couple stacks. And I've got a Carvin Steve Vai Legacy 100 watt head. This thing is, again, brutal, monster, huge. It's 100 watts, but there's a switch in the back. You can flip from 100 to 50. And it can run 2 types of tubes. It can run the 6L6s or the EL34s. Right now, it's got the EL34s in it. 2-channel reverb, warm. It sounds like the best plexi you've ever heard. I mean, it's loud though. I mean, my goodness. And I had to leave behind a bunch of cabs, like my 412 cab when I left Los Angeles. I I was trying to get a van or a bigger car and try to sell my Mercedes and get, it just didn't happen. So I had to leave behind. Supposedly people were supposed to buy them from me and I ain't heard anything. So if you're out there, I'm coming for my cabs or sell them, send me the money. But I had the legacy cab, had V30s, vintage 30s in it. And right now I don't even have a cab. I've got the amp in my closet. And I'm trying to sell it. Like, it's almost too much. Again, I'm not even gigging. But it is good to have when you get older, like certain things you just don't want to sell. Like I don't want to. But I mean, if someone like, Little Rocker can, we shall see. And as far as guitars, for the last couple of years, I just play Z guitars. Zeke at Z has been really good to me. He custom made me 2 guitars. He made me a Junior, the first one I had made for me. Then he made me a Flying V. But in between that, he had another Junior, like a neck through, that he sold me. And then he had another Flying V that he made for himself, which is just like the Cadillac of Flying Vs. I mean, this thing is like amazing. He sold me that too. So I've got 4 of, the Z guitars, and he's in Rancho Cucamonga, California. You can find him on Facebook. Have him build you a guitar, man. I mean, if he's still doing it. I mean, I don't know. I haven't talked to him in a while, but for like the last couple of years, that's what I play. I mean, I've got like that cheap Telecaster that I sit around, but I'd like to have a guitar out in the living room that can just be beat up, grab it here. Don't even put it in the case. It's dusty, just grab it whenever you. But I don't do that with my custom Zs. Oh, and I also got my Johnny Thunders custom guitar, like a relic. But my Zs are, and I'll do an episode on my Z guitars. They're just so good. I mean, for me, in my humble opinion, like I played every kind of thing, had every kind of custom shop, Gibson, Les Paul, whatever, Strat, Telly. I've had it all. And these Z guitars, I mean, for me, for what I like, I mean, I had my specs where it's just like one humbucker, a volume, and a kill switch. And right now I've got DiMarzio's in the ones he made for me. I've got the 36th anniversary PAF in my Junior, and in my Flying V, I've got a DiMarzio Fred, which is like the custom pickup Joe Satriani. But it sounds great. I mean, I love it. Then my other guitars, the one white Junior I have, it's the only one that I have like a Floyd on it, which I usually don't like the Floyds, but this one's got like titanium pieces and stays in tune. It's got these high output Seymour Duncan, big old screw magnets, some kind, I forgot what they're called. They're like the Dimebag Daryl or some, which I would never like, but for some reason they work. That guitar sounds incredible. Sustain and sweet feedback. And it's a neck through. The thing is heavy. And I like big fat necks. So that's got like a Seymour Duncan Invader or something like that. I don't even know the name of it. And then my other Flying V, the one that Zeke made for himself, which has got every kind of cool, and it's just so nice. It's got a Seymour Duncan custom shop JB, like hand wound Jeff Beck JB, which is, I think, the best selling pickup ever. I mean, every second they're slapping a JB in it. And I use the JB pickup a lot. If I wouldn't get it what I wanted out of my Les Paul, I'd always just throw in a JB. See, we're doing JB, and you can't go wrong. If you're looking for like a good solid pickup, just try the JB. I would rather. I mean, I use them both, like Seymour Duncan and DiMarzio, but it seems like I kind of lean towards DiMarzio pickups. I really like that 36th anniversary. And here's a trick. I've got the neck position in the bridge position. It's kind of like a secret I found. You're going down the rabbit hole, and just try it. And maybe not for everybody. but that's kind of my secret. I usually don't tell people, but it's wound for the neck, but I got it in the bridge. Love it, love it, love it, love it. And people hear it, they're just like, well, how do you do it? And how I found that out is somebody was saying that to get that authentic PAF, patent applied for, those first humbuckers, you get a Seymour Duncan 59, the neck, and then you put that in the bridge. And I did that first. Just, yeah, that's what I've been wanting, and the punch, and the. And when Zeke made the guitar, bam, slap it in. And again, I will show some of these guitars, but I'm always out looking for. Like right now, I'm in this small Midwest town. There is nothing around. I mean, there's just like, even on Craigslist, there's nothing. I mean, a few ads. I'm used to LA Craigslist, which is just like endless. You can spend, again, you can make a living, or a small, the way I live, trading, swapping, this, that, and the other. And I would, that's how I met Terry Kilgore. He was the guitarist of David Lee Roth. I was selling and trading and swapping so much on Craigslist. He would just show up, I'd meet him in the driveway, and he's like, oh yeah, you meet this guy, and he's whatever. And then by the second time, you're like, hey, I've been here, I know you. By the third time, it's like, oh, cool, hey, this is where. And then he invited me to his house. We were hanging out, and he modded this amp, this Gibson Atlas, which was basically a bass amp with like on wheels, this huge thing, and had a 15-inch speaker. He took that out, put in a new baffle, put in two 12s, added a master volume. So all I had is like tone, volume, master volume. Then he put these big dials, like these old like science dial, some kind of, brutal. The thing was just a Marshall killer. I mean, honestly, you can't, too much. We just rattled the house. And I forgot who I sold that to. There's a lot of people in the Los Angeles area that I sold gear to. Guitars. I used to make, Partcasters, Telecasters. A lot of people. And my clients, they're like, hey, what do I want? What I was teaching. Because I didn't technically give guitar lessons, but within singing, I play guitar, and instead of having a keyboard, I would play guitar while I sang. I would have to. Some of those songs, like learning on guitar, "I Will Always Love You," that old Dolly Parton, Whitney Houston, doing that on guitar, and like disco song, like you said, like you do what you got to do. We have clients that want to learn that stuff. You work it out. So I would help people out. Like, a matter of fact, I would take them to Guitar Center and say, look, this, that, and there's different levels. Like if someone's not gigging, they just need some kind of smaller, not everything has to be like a stack. I even found a company out of China, and I was going to start making my own guitars, but it's, I decided not to. I mean, they were good, but they basically were kind of outlaw guitars, and I didn't want to be known, But yeah, I almost made my my own line, and just in small batches, more for vanity's sake. Like, look, my name's on the guitar. Nah. And then setup too, like guitar setup. I just kind of learned to master how to set up a decent, I like low action. I don't want it buzzing, because I got tired of paying $40 to take it into. I mean, certain things like if the wiring, I'm not very good at soldering, and it makes me anxious and paranoid. So I'll take it in for certain things, but other than that, I mean, I'm ready to. I'm not scared of a truss rod and messing with the bridge and certain little tricks I've got up my sleeve. I can set up a pretty damn good guitar. In my humble opinion. I mean, it's what I like. And You know, everybody's different. Some people want a little higher, low, whatever. And we're kind of living through like the age of like the golden age of like cheap guitars. There's a lot of companies, and I said this before in a podcast, like there's Rondo Music, guitarsgarden.com, Guitar Fetish. There's a plethora of like cheap, for now anyways, really good cheap guitars. I'm talking like, you know, 300 and less. That'll kind of blow your mind. Like, wow, I mean, I remember how shitty guitars were, even in the 80s. Like, there was some shit. And there wasn't all this around, you know, like Guitar Centers and all that. Wherever I was, there wasn't. And quite honestly, you just got to find what you got and work with what you have. I mean, you're never going to be, you know, satisfied to like, oh, this is perfect, I'm happy. And it's kind of a form of self-sabotage, some of these guitarists, where it's like, dude, just learn how to, you know, your guitar tone, all these nuances, no one's going to know. What about the fucking song? Everybody's going to know how shitty your songs are. Worry about that. You know, verse, chorus, you know, write a tune. That drives me crazy, these noodling, because I've watched some of these videos and they're the same old pentatonic, this, and talking about the same shit. And oh God, they're all following the fool. Just do your own thing. Write a song. Concentrate on your song. Listen to some Buddy Holly, some Beatles, you know, it's like, you know, people are a sucker for a cool, you know, chorus, melody. Write those songs. Forget about you, this, that, and the other. Oh no, see it one, and then there's a fill. It's never ending. And then all that you watch some of these videos, and then you listen to their tone. It's just like, what the? Are you serious? Like, yeah. I mean, if you have any kind of clean signal, just throw a pedal in front of it if you want. You know. For years, I would just use like a clean tubes channel and literally have like a DS1, like that orange Boss DS1 pedal. And that was it. Like that all through the 90s, that's kind of what I did. But then the DS1, those pedals aren't as good as they used to be. I guess I had like the Japanese version, because the last time I had a client pull one out, new from out of the box, and it's just like, what is this? Like, because I used it more for a boost. I turned down the distortion, cranked up the tone, and it was more like pushing the, you know, I'm not metal, so I got more rock and roll tone. And I wasn't getting it out of this, those newer, yeah, maybe, who knows, maybe it was because we were using a solid state amp. Like I used to get a lot of orange amps in trades. I got this little like a 20-watt head, had like one tube. Thing was a beast, but not for me. I mean, orange amps for me are a little open and not, you know, it's too. I'm sure there's one out there. If I haven't played them all, but I would rather just have an old school Marshall. My favorite one is the JMP 50-watt vertical input. You know, master volume. Just crank that thing, go. Because again, I'm not doing a lot of this and that and chimey and chorusy. I'm just, again, just for me, I'm just like a garage rock dude. Like I just 3-chord rock and roll. There you go. Johnny Thunders is plug in, bam, go. I mean, I don't think you need all this stuff and they all sound the same. You know, like, oh, the Klon pedal. It's like, come on, man. And those Klon pedals, are you serious? Like, you really want to spend that kind of money? No thanks. I think it's more impressive to have like cheaper gear and pulling it off. I had a friend of mine who's like, look, I got this old 80s crate amp. It's a 212. It just sounds like, you know, whatever. You want it? I was like, yeah, bring it over. And I had more amps there, and I wasn't even really using it. But then eventually, you're selling amps. This, that, next thing you know, I'm stuck with this thing, and and I was selling like a custom shop TV yellow Gibson Les Paul special. And the guy, when I had him over, he literally like walked in. He's like, "This is all I gotta play through this crate." And I was like, "Hey man, I had heads and stuff, but I had another speaker. So yeah, you're gonna have to play through this crate." He's kind of like making fun of me, like, "Oh god, like we're gonna crate it." But I was like, "Look, I learned how to EQ it. There's only one sound on it. It's on the dirty channel. You gotta. And he was shocked. He's like, "My God, this amp sounds amazing. I'll tell you what, I'll buy the amp for the price if you throw in this crate." Like 5 minutes ago, you were making fun. Like, how dare you make me play? Now you want the damn thing, and it was covered in like carpet. It was one of those old, stupid looking. So I did. I was like, "Fuck it." I mean, they gave it to me, so I don't have any money in it. So you just never know. You never know. Nowadays, it's just there's all kinds of plugins and you know these pedals that you can like plug in. They're powered by the PA. You just need this little strip of whatever it is. So yeah, there's a lot of options. I love different amps for different sound. Even the smaller, cheaper. Sometimes you can get some like crazy tones out of them. And so go out and buy an amp, buy a new guitar, buy a used guitar, buy a used amp. Check them out. Get some pedals. Nowadays, there's cheap pedals. You can go on like Amazon and get like really cheap. Or some kind of line 6 thing, imajig. I don't necessarily use them live, but I like to have around just being creative, like some amp with effects, just to, fart around and have fun. Yeah, thanks for listening to me rant like a madman. I'm still sick. I've got this flu. Again, if you want to support the channel, in the description, there's Zelle. And I love y'all. Be blessed. And I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.